Moving on.
No, I don't think Hillary voted.
Your Worship?
Dane? Yeah. You do it. You got a motion?
Now, just to be clear, councillors, I'm working through the pages. If there's any, I drew that one to your attention, or actually Jenny did. But if the responsibility is on all of us around the table to raise the ones that come to your attention. So I'm going to move through the pages on that basis. Councillor Wiley.
Your Worship, Lindsay Day's submission on essentially double charging the Dunedin Swim Coaching Board.
Page 14, third one down. Page 14, third one down.
Right.
Submission being that they currently pay an entry to enter the Moana Port, plus they are also required to pay $1 to $2 per week to cover lane swimming costs.
Right. Councillor Kelp, do you have a comment to make?
Just a question. When they pay the lane, whatever it is that a student discounted rate?
No. We did get some information. I don't think it's in part of the material that's been circulated. From the Aquatic Services, I asked a series of questions, and that is how much revenue is generated by the lane charges. So the $2 per lane for the first 6 lanes generates about $12,000 of income a year, and the $10 per lane per hour for the other over 6 generates about $19,000. The original reason for putting the charge in was to try and encourage clubs to make more efficient use of their lane space. I asked the question whether that had been observed, and the information back is that it hasn't really had an impact on lane space used by squads. There was some anecdotal evidence early on, but the advice from staff is that they haven't really noticed much of a change. In terms of the actual ask, in the next question was what was the cost to the Dunedin Swim Coach Board? And a financial year, it's just under $9,000, which was charged in the last 12-month period. And in terms of swimmers in who get the coaching, most of them have 12-month season passes and 9-month season passes. So they, in terms of what revenue would they generate, they pay that 9-month or 12-month discount fee anyway. So the cost of the board is about $9,000, and obviously Lindsay Day's asked that to be reviewed. So that was just the financial stuff around that.
Right. Can you tell me, Mr. Avery, the staff comment here is what you've just told us, the advice that you're reporting back to council, or is there more to come? Because it says here, staff are working.
No, the staff view there was after having received the, I suppose, the submission and then wanting to wait for this discussion to see what the outcome was. That's the best information we've got around both the revenue that's generated by those lane charges and the impact on the Dunedin Swim Coach Board.
Right, so what I'm asking is, do we need to wait for further advice back from staff and recommendations?
No.
We don't.
But there's no more advice we can give on that.
Okay, so is anyone of the mind to do anything about it or to respond to it in any way other than
Yes.
move on? Councillor McTavish and then Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson.
Well, it strikes me that there was 2 aspects to this. One was the charge itself, but the other was the slightly infuriating situation where they're being restricted to a certain number of lanes, but there's nobody swimming, or there's very few people swimming in the rest of the pool. And I know that Councillor Wilson has drafted a motion, which I'm happy to support it, but she's got the wording somewhere, which basically says, could staff be allowed to use their common sense with regard to this? I think the charge should stay for the lanes that they're contracting to use, so that gives them a minimum number of lanes. But to the extent that there is not pressure on the other space, I think staff ought to be able to make a decision that they can expand into another lane if that seems sensible.
2 aspects to that. One is that the Swim Coach Board's been pretty successful in terms of generating more swimmers, which is great from a coaching point of view. They are using in excess of 6 lanes. They don't have the capacity to reduce below 6 lanes, so the $10 per lane above 6 is having a significant economic impact on them. And they won't reduce the number of lanes below 6 because they can't. They're already too successful for that. So the $10 per lane after 6 was, I think, put in at this meeting a year ago or 2 years ago. That is part of the significant impact on the finances, and I suppose that's one of the questions that Lindsay's raised. Secondly, there already is flexibility staff who determine the lane allocation space. The difficulty that they have is that at times there are some lanes which aren't being used, at other times those lanes are being used, heavily used by the public. And it varies through the day, obviously. The concern that staff have is, while providing flexibility or greater lane space for the swim coach board, there is ultimately a message given to the casual swimmers that the available lane space gets less and less. And so part of it's trying to strike a fine balance between having space that the public knows will be available if they happen to go up there versus the needs of the board, and it's finely balanced at times. There is some flexibility, and I suppose the pool staff are the best placed to make that judgment call. We have talked in the past about trying to provide more lane space. They are concerned at the peak times because that will ultimately reduce the numbers of public that can get access. It's a fine balancing act. That's the issue for us.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, I get that explanation. I suppose I'm still would be keen that there be the ability to make a decision on the spot, but you're saying that in fact, I took it from the submission that they were working with the number of lanes that they were allowed, and they were getting frustrated that there was nights or whatever where there was additional space that they could be used rather than crowded space. But you're telling me they're actually paying for that extra space now and getting it?
No. They're still, under the agreement we've got with the swim coach board, we've guaranteed them a certain number of lanes at certain times. That's the agreement, because we needed to give them certainty of lane space. They've been very successful in terms of their numbers, which is great from a swimming point of view, but they are constrained by our available space. It's then a judgment call about allocating more lane space out of the public pool to allow them to expand, which then potentially impacts on the public's ability to find lane space for more casual swimming at various times. And it does fluctuate during the day.
I wasn't, okay, just to be sure, I wasn't suggesting that they should be allocated in advance, if you like, additional lane space. I was simply saying that if they're all there on the night and there's nobody else next door, that the staff should be able to use their discretion to say, well, look, go for your life, but it's not a case of giving you some contractual right to that additional lane or lanes.
I have talked to them in the past about the degree of flexibility. They are concerned because of needing to give certainty to members of the public, I suppose, that there is some lane space. And it's like, it's a difficult one, and at times it can be very fraught. If you've been up there with the swim coach board and when they're in operation, or even some of the swim clubs, if you go up at various times, if you're a casual swimmer, it can be very, very congested. So they've got to find balancing act day to day. So we can certainly provide them with greater flexibility, but at the end of the day, they'll still need to make that call. But in a sense, they've got that at the moment. There's no restriction on them to be able to do that. But operationally, it does pose some difficulties, particularly if there's a day when, one day in the week when there's not many, and so the swim board takes over that lane, and then the next day there's actually more members of the public, and you've got to take that back, because they also need certainty about their lane allocation for their squads.
Well, I think the certainty is what they're paying for.
Yeah.
The additional one is not a case of taking it back. You got given it yesterday because it was there. You're not being given it today because it isn't, because there's casual swimmers in there.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, actually, it's more a statement than a question, but that perhaps I should declare an interest as a reasonably keen swimmer. But the problem I've had going up there not requiring swimming lessons, when they've got 6 lanes booked, they've got half a dozen kids in the first lane next to the side of the pool, and they've got 4 or 5 lanes, and no one's in them, and then there's 6 or 7 people per lane in the other sides, and you know, they even get growly sometimes if they'll occasionally put a sign out saying this lane available temporarily. But other times I've gone into those lanes just because of the sheer congestion. Obviously, imagine swimming past me is like swimming past the Bismarck. But the bottom line is that there's often plenty of space in those lanes that's not being utilised. And I think if there was a wee bit more flexibility both ways, you could avoid a problem. But
Is that some of the swim clubs have variable use of lanes, and that was the intent of the lane charge?
that's
Try and reduce the number of lanes that they might use.
That's
but
the
don't need
shallow end of the main pool between the diving well.
You can't go in the deep end.
Yeah, I can go in the deep end, but it's often full too with water polo and everyone else, so it is a bit frustrating.
Right,
Thursday night about 9:30 is all right for a swim.
so is everyone happy that the staff comment and B, the explanation we've just had addresses the issue as well as it can be?
I wonder whether staff have considered, and given that we established the 6-lane point, as it were, on the basis of trying to maximise the efficiency of the use of space, given that the use or the numbers have grown, would staff consider it appropriate that we review that 6-lane where the $10 thing kicks in, and maybe with an eye to increasing that to 8 or something, in recognition of the fact that they are using that space efficiently, it's just that the numbers have expanded?
Well, one option is for the Dunedin Swim Coach Board, because contractually, or we have a contractual arrangement with them to actually provide them with more than 6 lanes now, which they're mostly full. So one option for the board is to provide them with a $2 per hour lane charge for all the lanes that they are contractually provided for. Because the original intent of the $10 was to try and minimise excessive use. The evidence, if you go up to when the swim coach board, when the board's in motion, as opposed to swim clubs, which I think is slightly different, is that they are fully utilising, as I understand it, the full amount of space. The $10 an hour lane charge will hit them all the time because they're always using more than 6 lanes. So one option would be to, if you wanted to retain the lane charges, to have, for them anyway, you know, $2 per lane for the lanes that we provide them, and still keep it in for those other swim clubs or other things.
So that would have an impact on the budget, I assume, for this 20...
Well, and as I noted before, the cost, the charge that the board have paid in the last 12 months is just under $9,000. I don't know how much of that is due to the using in excess of 6 lanes. I suspect quite a lot. I think they use about 8 lanes or 9 lanes. So that's quite a big impost for something that they have. They can't reduce the number of lanes because of being successful. So
perhaps, Your Worship, if they were able to bring back the figures around that, I mean, I don't know what...
Well, I'd just like someone to move something.
I'll move something.
Right.
First of all, I'd like to say that congratulations to Lindsay, who we put up there to organise something which was fraught. He's done a really good job, and I think it's voluntary. But I'd just like to say that he's organised this and got things sorted up there which were not particularly working at one stage. Secondly, I'd like to move that we request a report to CD&E to advise how the system is working within the next 6 months. Now, we're going to have changes up there in different schools coming in, I presume. I think I don't want to be dealing with this in a long-term plan issue. I think it's going to be fraught enough next year, and I think it's something that would have a much better conversation about, allowing the new management coming into speed and to get up on top of it and to have those discussions, and if we could have it reported within 6 months, and then have that discussion then for the forthcoming year.
Is there a second? Councillor Wiley?
Sorry.
That's right. Any other discussion? Anyone else like to speak to this? Not that being the case, would you like your right to reply?
No, Your Worship.
All right, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Are there any further moves on aquatic services of any kind? And if there are, you need to have a... Right, okay.
Speak to it from here. So I've just worked out in relation to the issue of community grants to small groups that come through operational budgets. So that's small museums, small pools, small libraries. Just a motion that reads that staff consider in time for the 15-16 long-term plan budget development a process to annually review the quantum of grants received by community groups from operational budgets for the purpose of operating community facilities. So it's not necessarily tagging it to inflation, but just having a process in place to allow those groups to have a conversation with council about that.
And just to put this in context, that will mean that there will be some submissions that will be taken care of, responses to them will be taken care of by this rather than going through them individually. Secondly, Councillor Staines, when it's up there we can, right, there it is. So I'll open this up for discussion.
Put the motion, Commissioner. No discussion, put the motion.
I've just got a question. So are we just, the first three words, that staff consider, so are we just allowing them to make the judgment call rather than come back with a particular view?
Consider and report
Yep, that's good.
in time for the, good point.
Could this,
Councillor Lord.
could this be linked in with the increase in the community services charge to just keep that inflation proof adjusted to?
Well, they will come, I see what you mean, they will come back.
In view of the Federated Farmers submission that pointed out that, I can't remember the exact figures, but I think the general rate had jumped by 84%, the
Yes, no, I'll take
community
your point.
16% or something. We could solve ourselves a lot of problems.
I think that that can be part of the consideration that staff.
Yeah, and the reason why I think the word considered, sorry, I didn't hear the response to that, Andrew, but the reason just talking with Rebecca, I think the word consider is important is because the way it's currently worded, operational budgets do cover civic grants and that sort of thing as well, and that's not the intention, is not to cover those, the civic grants and the ones that can come to us through annual plan. It's a way of covering the other ones that sit deep within operational budget. So staff just need to consider how to separate those things. And yeah,
But we're still expecting a report back.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. Councillor Wiley.
Are these grants $10,000 and under, or are they?
There's a range of them.
Does it also include things that have got cover those agreement things?
Yes, sir.
Yes, and there's a,
Service level agreements.
because aren't they much the same as each other, or am I?
I think that what distinguishes these, if I'm correct, is that they come through operational budgets and don't necessarily come to a grants process. And so there's no, as Councillor McTavish explained before, there's no mechanism for them to be increased over any length of time. So that's what's being sought. They may come back and say it's too hard, but what we want is them to come back and address it.
Because we ought to be looking at all of them, shouldn't we? Yes.
Well, the ones that come through grants mechanisms, we get looked at in that context, not through
I think
operational.
that process is being reviewed through the whole grant process, but not this.
If I can, through the chair, the under service level agreements, there is an annual review in terms of the amount of the service level agreement.
But some of these aren't service level agreements. So
Okay.
grants to museums and things.
Is there any further discussion? Oh, Councillor Wiley, I think.
Yeah, I'm just still,
Come over.
I'm still confused because I heard 10,000, 15,000 and 20,000. So,
There's a whole range of grants which go to small or to community groups for the purposes of operating community facilities. Some of them are in the magnitude of Moanagao, which is,
I think it's about 50.
some of them are small. They're like
3,000 to the visitors at the cruise ship at Port Chalmers.
okay,
5,000 to various community libraries, etc.
okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Now, are there any, we've got down to the end of aquatic services. Is everyone content that we've dealt with all of those? And as I say, that one could deal with some of the others as they pop up. Jenny, where are we going now?
106.
Page 106 we're jumping to, and this is still Mr. Rees. From Parks and Recreation, the third one down. Now, what?
Ignoring the civic grants.
Sorry.
Ignoring the grants.
And ignoring the civic grants.
Halfway down page 107.
Yeah, and that goes over to about halfway down page 107. Now, in the interests of moving along, if anyone wants to move something or say something, Councillor Wells.
Arowana Pilots Wharf, I sat through the discussion about this unsafe state of it. I've also asked the question during the submissions about giving them a time frame to work to, appreciating that's our delays to a certain extent at the moment. But I think if we gave them a time frame that they had to work to.
If I can, to the Chair, I apologise, I missed the start of the comment, but if I could ask for what delays are being talked about?
Well, I think there's some process issues that they're working through at the moment, and that's why some things haven't happened. But I thought, in answer to a question I posed, is having a limit to the time frame to do the job may, A, give them more chance of getting money, but it also gets rid of the latent liability that the council has that was discussed and brought up last year. Now, I'm not going to say that we may not change that date, but it was a question I posed at the time.
If I can, through the Chair, I'm actually not aware of any time delays. What the staff response is based on is that no plan has been formally submitted to date for this work. And that's what the staff comment is based on. I'm not aware of any delays in process in terms of requiring any staff response or input.
No, what I'm saying is putting a time frame for them to work to get this job done, because we've got a latent liability otherwise. It was quite clearly in the reports last year, but it also gives them a date to work to.
Right, what I want is a motion.
Okay. I don't believe there's a motion required for this item. Very simply, they are just wanting confirmation that if they restore the wharf, that the city will maintain it forever and a day. They don't want to, correct, well, the city already own the wharf, but the community want to rescue and restore it. And if they go about and do that, they don't want the liability of having to maintain it forever and a day. So they're really asking the city just to accept maintenance of the facility, and that won't occur until the thing is restored.
So what we've said is when we met with them,
it's not an issue in terms of the budgetary.
and we said when we met with them, we said we would go back to them with an estimate of the demolition costs if we have to pay for that, and an estimate of what our costs would be. There was a meeting with Councillor Noon and myself just recently. We would go back to them and tell them what our ongoing maintenance costs will be, and they were told that isn't currently in the budget. So there is no impact for 14-15.
Can I just be clear? We've been waiting, as I understand it, for a proposal that then can be considered, because there are significant issues around council assuming ownership of that structure. That simply needs to be reported to council before we make a decision. And as my understanding, we're waiting for a proposal that we haven't had to be able to do that.
Okay.
That's fine, and we did have when I say we, I mean I was there at the meeting with Aramorana League representatives, and they, on an A4, they have a rough sketch of what they want to do, because basically what they want to do is replace the piles and replace the decking and basically replace light with light. So what you actually see there now will eventually be replaced with something new, but in the same form. So that's essentially the plan.
So bottom line is we're content with the staff comment here.
Absolutely.
And the process.
And there's a report coming to the next C&E.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'll move that we fund the mountain bike Otago $5,000 in the 14-15 year, just for the purposes of discussion. They asked for 10. Oh, so we're not doing some grants. Sorry. Sorry.
Talking about grants.
I missed the line.
Page 107.
Page 107. John Brumble.
Good old John Brumble.
Sorry.
So Parks and Recreation, 107.
The issue raised by Sport Otago in relation to the 175,000 that they would like to fast forward the sports field work. I understand from Mick that this is not holding up the development of the Parks and Recreation strategy, but Mick, you just may wish to clarify that for councillors.
Thank you to the chair. Yes, I'm happy to clarify that a little bit more. I understand through conversations with John Brimble about his perception and understanding of the strategic planning process, but in terms of the process that my staff are involved in, the council's involved in with the Parks and Recreation strategy, front-loading or doing this work now is not holding the strategic planning process up. The directions for the Parks and Recreation strategy do not depend on this information. The implementation planning that comes from this will depend on the quality of the information that John and his team at Sport Otago are helping us to get. But it won't hold up the sport. And the staff comment is based on not impacting on the 14-15 years, but giving us some time to work with him about coming up for a better plan of trying to get that work done more quickly within current levels of funding.
Right. 108.
The footbridge on Ross Creek, I am happy that we don't put any money into it, but I think the response should be something that staff are happy to discuss with a community group or anything to look at partnering a resolution or solution. There should be a response that we can then try and engage or empower community to do their own thing, rather than saying we won't do anything till we've got some money.
I don't understand. Sorry.
Most regional councils.
I don't understand why we can't say we're not building a bridge.
Well, because it's just saying we're not building a bridge. Why don't we say, actually, if you want that bridge, we're happy to work with you in order for you to well, otherwise we're going to put a whole lot of money into stopping people walking over a pipe.
Just make a comment. Has anyone walked through where Peter Dowden's talking about?
This isn't Peter Dowden's mission.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
But it relates to the same issue?
Yeah.
Yes and no, because the response for Peter Dowden's is different.
All I was going to say, there are alternatives for crossing Ross Creek rather than this particular spot. You don't actually need to climb across the pipe. You can wade through the
depending on
about
how
that
deep
and walk over the slippery rocks, but you can also go upstream, downstream, so there are alternatives.
Anyone want to move anything? 109. $110.
Can I just ask, is any, sorry, for Sharon Benny, page 111, that you say, did you say 111?
110.
100, okay.
I was going to,
Sorry, which one?
John Wilson Drive.
yeah, Jim Sports,
Count 110.
110 Fiona Jenkins.
Are you suggesting something different from the staff comment, or?
I think there may be some other sports that may want to be involved in something similar, and I'm just asking if there's a chance that staff or somebody can look into seeing how that works with the rest of sports organisations around town.
That was the one that they teamed up with hockey and mountain bike.
If I can, through the chair, I am aware through a conversation that some other sports groups expressed a lot of pleasure that this proposal had come into council, but they did also flag up, my understanding is that they would like to connect up and see if there's a possibility of them being part of that action too. And I think in terms of our conversations, staff's conversations with Sport Otago and others, we'll certainly, perhaps if the council has any specific groups in mind that have contacted him, we'd be happy to do that, because this will be a very good stage to make those connections.
Okay. Can I just ask? Yeah, Councillor Lynch.
You'll recall when these submissions were presented, I asked about other synergies with other facilities, and I've since asked a few more questions in that sector, and it's fair to say that I know school gyms and all the rest of them are pretty heavily used, but I find it a bit worrying that this is quite an exciting proposal. I'm not sure it's in the best place, but I can see why with the mountain bike tracks that, there's some major potential advantages. But it's a bit like the legacy issues we get of things that might or might not be fashionable, and I have no understanding of that, that do something great and then a few years later there's surplus facilities that we end up trying to pick up, whether they're Mornington's, a clubhouse or whatever else. And I just am concerned that given the scale of the city, notwithstanding the energy and enthusiasm of both the hockey people and the promoters of the gym sports people, activities, that this might be something that might turn into something other than the wonderful facility you'd hope it would be in a few years' time. And in that respect, I've got some confidence because you're obviously involved in discussions. But I'm wondering if you can shed any light on the overall use issues of these types of facilities around town and possible synergies. I mean, we've seen additions to the Edgar Centre to accommodate both more sprung floors and the proper competitive arena. It just seems to me to build yet another gym because you want to leave your stuff out and not have to move it, which I understand. But then have all the plant issues and the rest of it that you've got is not the most efficient way to do this sort of thing.
If I can, through the Chair, hopefully in part response to that, the staff, in particular Hamish Black, who's our project team leader, has been involved with been particularly involved with gym sports through the War Memorial Gymnasium. Their concerns with the future of that and the use of that and where council was going for about 4 years now. And to make a very long story short, the gym sports people have come through quite a long journey of looking at how to ask council to provide a whole lot of things that they think they need, to looking at the situation very closely amongst themselves in a much longer term about what do we need in the future. Are we hanging on to the War Memorial Gymnasium because in terms of leverage for council's input? And this proposal has been born from, I guess, 3 to 4 years of consideration. Now, the involvement of Logan Park, I mean, there's a business case yet to be proved here. What part or may not be what part may or may not be asked of council has yet to be determined. They've flagged up an interest in getting some funding if council were to realise any benefit from alternate use, but it's got a way to go yet. What is hugely pleasing is to see the synergies that have already been arrived at between 3 or 4 groups and the school in question, which, to be honest, 3 or 4 years ago would have been a pipe dream. It's hugely optimistic in terms of multi-using and, I guess, groups working together for mutual benefit. At this stage, not making it a proviso that council do anything other than listen and be a part of the process.
Can I just ask one more? I don't know if you were here, mate, but I expressed a concern about the coldness of that site. Would that impact? I mean, we're talking about hockey players running around who are going to be warm, hopefully, and we're talking about indoor activities. So is the location an issue in itself?
I would have to say to the Chair that, I think right from the start, there have been eyebrows raised in terms of really. There are some huge benefits, particularly in terms of mountain biking at Otago, the proximity of the facility to the tertiary precinct, the adjacent facilities at Logan Park, whether or not they counterbalance the concerns, the basic ones of heating and environment and the energy requirements are yet to be seen. They will certainly need to be closely looked at.
Thank you.
Councillor Kay.
just in the spirit of Councillor Wilson's consistency, are they completely aware that we don't have any money in the long-term plan for any of what's going on here? Because another way that people seem to get very disappointed with us is that our staff have conversations with them over a period that leads them to believe that we're very on board with something, and then all of a sudden, when we come talking to real money, actual money, then the whole thing falls apart. So are they, and are they also aware that we're not in a position to sort of ring fence the proceeds of one thing when the money from that might go to somewhere else, and just say, oh, well, so long as you don't spend more than what we might sell this one for you. You know, that connection is a bit of a worry to me.
If I can, to the chair, staff involved have certainly made it clear to those who listen that those kind of guarantees can't be made. But at the same time, I think it would be unreasonable. It wouldn't be truthful of me to say that there aren't some expectations amongst the people involved. And I think the reference here to any potential proceeds from what council may or may not do with premises at the War Memorial Gymnasium reflects that. We can only, as staff, keep reiterating the fact that there will be no commitment, there can be no commitment. And first of all, you need to come up with a business case that doesn't rely on such a commitment. I think that's all we can do.
The other part of that context, and I think I raised it at its time of submission, is that there were formal discussions between Gym Sport and Council, and it came to at a council level where the possibility of using the proceeds from the sale of the War Memorial Gym to build another facility which they would use was talked about quite formally with them. So there is an understandable level of not necessarily obligation at all, but I don't want anyone to go away, particularly people who weren't here 2 years ago, go away with the idea that this has never been talked about, because it has with them, and it was to be explored. In fact, there was a formal council motion somewhere asking staff to investigate different sites with a view to building as an alternative to the gym, for gym sports.
Can we just make it clear, because I now have heard a sort of an expectation, and that they have to be fair, an expectation and a commitment by us to get. I'm becoming more uncomfortable by the minute with what we might. I think we should just keep having in our, especially our written conversations with them, that we are not committing ourselves to things here. This is not. I mean, it sounds to me sort of quite positive and quite likely in things, but we don't want to find ourselves in a position where they have reasonable expectations that we're in no position to meet, or we choose not to. Can we make sure we have in the written stuff that, if there was any point in saying that earlier in the motion, there's a point in saying it now.
What I'm pointing out is that there's a fundamental difference in situation in that there have been discussions with this group about using our asset for their benefit, and so what I'm pointing out is that it would be risky and would be putting some previous understandings at risk if we categorically said we will not do something that we indicated we would discuss before. That's all, because this is a different situation. There have been discussions on this. Councillor Thompson.
Well, yeah, I just want to reinforce that and make Councillor Calvert even more uncomfortable. I think to the extent that we have undertaken discussions with an organisation, we have created some expectation, and I'm not sure that those are unreasonable expectations in this particular instance. You have a community facility which is used by a sport to have that support in. It doesn't seem to me to be beyond the pale to suggest that if it no longer meets the needs of that particular community, and they are demonstrating in significant manner that they could put considerable energy and resources towards it, that you wouldn't at least consider that as being one of the potential options, is to take that asset and use it somewhere else in a much better way. So of course we can't give a guarantee, and I don't think we ever have given a guarantee, but to the extent that this council has discussed that with them, I don't think we're in a position to, at this point in time, to withdraw, and I don't think we should. I think that's a fundamentally different situation from a new build, something that hasn't existed before, and frankly, if you could take that young woman and bottle her and, you know, sprinkle her over a few other organisations around the city, I suspect that the town would be a great deal better off. So, you know, that's my view.
Look like a mixed metaphor. Councillor.
I'd just like to say that I heard myself sounding quite negative about the proposal before, because I do have some concerns, but what hasn't been said is that the facility they're using at the moment leaves rather a lot to be desired. It's a bloody grotty old gymnasium. It might have a really good floor, but don't use the toilets or the changing rooms if you don't mind. So while it's our facility, it is a liability, and if we were to either do it up or get rid of it, there would be a huge demand to replace it. So I think the discussions that have been had are perfectly sensible.
Well, I'm just, in the interest of time, I wonder whether once the feasibility study has got into the point that it is able to be presented, that we just bring it back through C&E along with an assessment of Caledonian for consideration at that time.
But Councillor the Chair, I just, in terms of the staff response, I hope that satisfies the concern. I mean, it is the intention that during the 14-15 financial year that we will report back to Council to progress the decision-making process on the long-term future of that gymnasium as a consequence of this.
Okay. So is everyone happy that you don't need to move anything? Thank you. It's a fairly significant proposal, so it needed to be addressed. Page 111.
Something on 113.
113. Nothing on 112. 113, yes.
Your Worship, I'm proposing a broad motion which I hope will cover off a few issues, and I've discussed this briefly with Mick and just run it past Sue. And this is in relation, we've had a number of requests from different community groups for progress on different aspects of mainly community initiated work that they would like to do to improve sports grounds or to improve reserves or whatever, and for resource constraint. Sorry?
Or cross the pipe.
Yeah, that's right, or cross a pipe or a bridge or a stream or whatever. And for whatever reason, mainly resource constraint reasons, our ability to respond to those all in a timely manner is restricted. So I'm proposing that staff report back on cross-council mechanisms that may enable greater and more timely acceptance of voluntary community efforts to progress community-initiated projects on public land. And this is an attempt to things like sycamores, for example. Staff are going to be working on a pilot with that group over the next few months. If we can develop a full framework for that work, that would potentially enable more of this work to be done by community groups rather than it coming to us year after year an annual plan.
Well, I'll second that because I've had some discussions already about the need for such a mechanism. So, yeah, a good initiative. Discussion. Would you would say any more about it, or
only that I probably should change public to council. Councillor Peach pointed that out.
okay? Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And that will deal with a few of them. 114.
On page 113, Richard Kinley.
Just before we get to 113, what about Civic Rights?
Civic Rights.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep. Richard Kinley, Morning Football Club. Oh, this is the one with the holes in the walls.
Yeah.
That you've already forgiven the refund.
What?
We should withdraw and leave the ministry.
What's this is the morning. This is. And during the submissions, I expressed just some disquiet at the fact that they were being charged rent that they frankly couldn't use the place. They said because it was in such a poor state. So it's about can the place be made, at the very least, weather-proof for their use within the existing budgets.
If I can, Your Worship, yes, they are being charged rent at the moment. There have been other leases and arrangements in the past. I think it's about $100 or something like that, but that's not the point. The staff response, and I have followed up on this personally and checked to see that this is as accurate as it can be. And there is work that's been deferred at these club rooms. And I have to say these are old facilities. There used to be public toilets there as part of which were closed and in fact blocked up so they couldn't be used. Somewhere along the line, somebody's forgotten that the people using the changing rooms might want to go to the toilet in the past. So there is work to be done there. It has been deferred in terms of, I guess, balancing budgets in previous years. It will be is going to happen now. Whether it's able to be funded at the level of improvement that the club is aspiring to is something which Richard and the staff will work directly with. But work will be done to carry out the basics that are required for their occupation.
My understanding of what they said was that they weren't expecting anything above keeping the weather down, pretty much. And so they had a dry floor to put things on and it wasn't going to rain inside. So I wonder, in the spirit of the previous resolution, whether we could just say, don't pay any rent, you fix it, if you want.
If I can to the Chair, I think in terms of the rent they pay, which is minimal, it would take a few years to fund what needs to be done. I think that we're talking in...
No, I'm not talking about the quantum, I'm just saying, I'm just using it as a principle, I'm just saying, if we said to them, look, it's an old building, you've said to yourself, it's an old toilet, if they wanted to put a couple of boards across the vent holes and got the weather out and we didn't charge them any rent and they were happy, what's the problem? If
I can, my understanding is that it's a bit more than putting a few boards against, but I will certainly take that back to staff on that. My understanding is there's some roof problems. Yes, there are old ventilation blocks that could be blocked up and that can certainly be done. But there is also the fundamental issue of actually making some kind of usable toilet facility. I mean, which is going to take money.
They did say in their submission they didn't require the toilets. They said they occasionally use the gas showers that are there, but they were quite happy to use the public toilets at the other side of the ground.
Right. So my concern about these staff comments is that two things. One, you could interpret it as when the drainage issues and the building can be fixed together, we will think about putting it into the long-term plan and doing it. And frankly, given that we're charging rent for it, that's too long.
If I can, I'm sorry if the staff comment is ambiguous. The long-term plan is solely in reference to drainage. Solely in reference, because drainage is quite a considerable renewal or upgrade program, which was which is now unfunded. Funding went years ago.
Taken care of in the previous resolution. I'm just wanting to. I'm just wanting to address the basic issues of the building with some alacrity. Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, as long as that alacrity was expressed in the response, it would be good. I mean, can we get...
My question was just we.
Yeah.
I mean...
If you don't mind me asking again, Chair, the other question that arose was they had the offer of a local guy to do drainage, and the local guy had offered his digger and was prepared to do the drainage, and we'd been told no. So was that a...
Yeah, I think that was taken care of in the previous resolution. And I'm sorry, Karen, I jumped over you to someone else. But you're making exactly the point I'm making.
I just want to know when, because they've had, I think it's a year since they last did, and when somebody just tells you the work's going to be prioritised and then mentions something about a long-term plan, that just makes you think, oh, well, that's never. So are we in a position to either know when or know when we can tell them when in the near future? So
if I can, through the Chair, if it's a question of telling them when they can board up the ventilation holes, that can be done immediately. If it's a question in terms of addressing other building issues, we obviously need to clarify those.
I think that's But our impression was that they are seeking really basic maintenance. Right. Councillor Wilson.
The next one down, Jim Collum. I'm actually not happy with the staff response here. I think that they acknowledge themselves that they've let the drop the ball here, and that they've actually got the means and capability of looking after themselves here, and that they could negotiate with the people that use their facilities over in. And I'm not quite sure we need to put. Well, no, it doesn't require a motion. I just don't like the response. I don't know that we need to put any resources into them fixing their own problems. They should be talking to the people who use your building as any building owner should. No, we don't own the building.
I think what they're saying is that they would like to abandon a $400,000 building and convince the council to take it over for 25 grand and continue to do whatever it is. Obviously, if we
With no maintenance for some time, as they said themselves.
Yes, but it's sitting, if they just abandon it now, we would need to do something with it. It's sitting on our land, and clearly they should have been charging other people for it. Clearly those other people, because they've been using them for nothing, are not keen on paying. Equally clearly, if you just boarded it up and left it alone, if they just abandoned it, then council would be probably needing to do something about toilets and things, as the staff mentioned here. So you can't just sort of ignore it. And if the cost of putting new toilets and things in was anything more than 25 grand, then...
So, Jenny's just told me that during the submission time, we asked for what was
the costs of running the pavilion, which they sent through to Lisa, and I've got it here. Total cost for running the Okaho Pavilion is $4,620, made up of insurance $1,200, electricity $2,500, water $320, ground rent $600, total $4,620.
Sorry, what was the second last one, Jenny?
Water.
Water. So that's no mortgage repayments.
That's just
That's
that way.
That we're paying interest only on the 25 grand.
Well,
I just think we've been
so,
places like this.
Councillor Wilson, you basically wanted a change of wording, is that?
Well, I just wanted to check that they did have that support, because this could take a lot of resources, and what we're doing is prioritising these resources to help a group that I think are actually very able to help themselves. They've come to the easy way to do it, and I don't think they're actually going to shut up their building. I think they just need to focus on getting someone to get their business start charging. Personally, I think they're a completely competent group. I was impressed by their ability to submit.
Living next door to them, I'd have to say, it's very likely, and I mean, I'm not interested in this because I don't use it at all, but I'd have to say that what they're telling me is that, like, there's only 8 old men left on the committee or whatever, and they haven't been bothered to chase up money or get it. I mean, the whole thing's a sort of amateur hour on a good day, but they're not prepared to do it anymore when they're focused down at the north end. And all that happens is that some people have got a key and they get into it themselves, and other people, somebody goes and lets them in from time to time.
All right, does anyone, Councillor Hall?
Yeah, my understanding of the groups that use it, it would probably be better if maybe Parks and Rec looked at who was actually using it, because they will still need changing rooms up there. They still need toilets, and if they walk away and abandon it, there's going to be nothing. So it may be better that if Parks and Rec look at who else is using it and see if they can make it a viable option or help them to get it to a viable option. Because I think they're going to, I think they're going to walk away and leave it, and we're going to have a sports ground with no toilets, no changing rooms.
If I can, through the chair, the staff comment is based on some level of knowledge in this direction. Salmon Hall, Knox College, Selwyn College, Arana, City College, Logan Park High School, Sassenachs Rugby, Otago Boys High School, Second 15, the university. So there are a number of groups. Sorry, I've forgotten cricket, it's not here.
All right, now, Councillor Vincent Pope.
Just seems to me, even before we did that list, that there is a need for at least the toilet facilities, if not more, changing. For the summer cricket season, I've seen lots of people hitting little red balls around up there, and obviously there's a much wider use for local tertiary institutions of various kinds. So it seems to me we should ask the department to see if they can suggest an alternate management proposal. I don't think we can stop, I don't know what the conditions of the lease are, but we can't stop them walking away if they feel like walking away. And that was pretty clearly what their submission was telling us. But the facility needs to be maintained some way or another. And we got the message well and truly, both from the budget that Jenny just read and what they said to us, that there are some maintenance, the outstanding maintenance issues that we'll need to attend to as well.
Councillor Wiley.
Is there a mechanism to sell it on the open market?
That's on our reserve.
If I can, through the Chair, I'd be reluctant to say there wasn't a mechanism, but it would be a tortuous one involving quite a lot of legal, I guess, direction, because it's the nature of the land, its reserve status, and the investment that Council's made in the past in terms of its community use for recreation. It's one of many instances of, I guess, the 150 buildings that the Parks and Recreation is responsible for. Over half of them are owned by clubs and groups who are finding difficulty maintaining assets. Asset management is not easy and it's not cheap, as we all know. In terms of what the staff response seeks to do here is to establish over a period of time, what we're recognising is that there is a wider use just in this club. There is definitely a benefit in terms of making public toilet facilities available in this precinct, and I guess that's what the response and the thinking is to date in terms of looking for a way of making sure that those public benefits are maintained, but without taking on too much responsibility for maintaining assets than we already have.
Councillor Stone. Oh, sorry, do you have another question?
Yeah, then is there a mechanism where someone could lease it for 20 years?
If the purposes of the lease were to consistent with the council's and the community's use of the area in terms of recreation, certainly one of the concerns in the past is that the toilets are owned, I guess, by the club, and what we would like to do, what councils would like to do, is to make toilet facilities more available for public use.
Councillor Stone.
Just following on and maybe in a slightly different direction. We know that there are a number of users of that facility. So is it possible for us to approach those users and see whether they have an interest in taking over responsibility for the building and then coming to some arrangement over the $25,000, how much of that would transfer to the new holder of the property and how much would be paid by council in order to convert the toilet facilities there to public toilets?
Okay, through the Chair, certainly that's the direction that the Parks Manager is looking to take. The expectation, and I think it's again fair to say this, the expectation out there is that if somebody walks away from their ownership responsibilities, the lease arrangements are such and have been for a long time that council takes responsibility for the asset. In other words, council now has a new asset that it didn't have before, and of course has a responsibility for doing something with it. That may be the expectation, but certainly the Parks Manager is looking to having that kind of conversation about I guess other ways of managing the responsibilities and groups continuing to use it.
My general thinking is along the lines that if the current users who use it aren't interested in it, then the next step would be to advertise it as a facility for a sporting organisation. So I guess you cater for those that are users first to see if they have an interest in it. If they haven't, then we're not going to get too beaten up if another sporting organisation comes along, says, yes, we're looking for club rooms, we will take on that responsibility, and then the groups that have been using it might not get access to it necessarily after that point, but they have had an opportunity.
Councillor Wilson.
And I'm sorry I'm sounding a bit negative on this one, but the advantage of this group is that they have a building on land owned by the council. There are many groups that by history serve a community really well that don't have their buildings on council land and will not get one iota of help from council staff if they're having difficulties because it's not on council land. And that's the inequity of us putting resources in here in this instance. Well, that's my understanding. If I've got that wrong, I'm really sorry. So the question is, are there instances where you've been asked for help with clubs and societies that don't own council land and actually you haven't been able to help because you didn't own the land and therefore you thought there wasn't an interest?
Can I suggest, Councillor, that
Yeah.
if you want to change the comment, make the suggestion or move in another direction.
Well, I'll move that. I'm happy for this to happen. The motion is that council support any club or organisation providing a recreational service where they're struggling with staff resources to find a resolution, because that is the only way you can do it fair and equitably. To the community groups, well, that's my point. It's not fair and equitable to the community groups that do own their own land and have looked after it for years and who have asked for help but don't get it.
Can I suggest that we restrict, I mean, it would be too open-ended. I mean, no, we couldn't. Can I suggest that if there's something to be addressed here, even if you want to go back to the club and say, not on your Nelly, you do it yourself, then you need to move that. But
Well, I know that I'm not going to have the support here, that's fine.
Possible motion that staff seek expressions of interest from existing sporting groups that use the facility to see whether there is a desire to take over the building, and if not, to advertise it for expressions of interest from any sporting organisation.
It's not out. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's not out. If you take my point. But it might be that we could modify that we broker an arrangement.
Maybe you have to do it in conjunction with a
land
landlord.
being the middle person, I don't know.
can I ask, and I don't know that anyone here will have the answer, presumably they've got a mortgage of $25,000, presumably there's some security on that. I assume that the security is the building. In the event that they walk away, isn't it the bank that then owns it and not us or not anybody else?
I think they
I would suggest that they would hold the club responsible.
Can I get I didn't answer that one, if there is an answer.
Well, that certainly would be our understanding, that that ownership would transfer.
So,
In conjunction with the Alhambra Union.
I
would have thought what would actually technically happen is that the bank would look to the rugby club to pay that 25 and regroup on their other building. So they would probably, I mean, they will already have a charge on their building down in the north end. So I think they would just, the bank might well be able to.
We can't know, so either we get a motion or we leave it the way it is. So, Councillor Staines,
I just preface it by saying that council staff work with the Alhambra Rugby Football Club to seek expressions of interest from other sporting codes using the building in taking over responsibility and addressing the like somewhere in there we've got to try and tie in that $25,000.
Can I suggest it's just...
Can I try and write something?
Yeah, can I suggest it's just that we work with the Alhambra Union and other parties, and that would include sporting groups, the bank, everybody, with a view to resolving the ownership issues and ongoing. So who's going to second? Right, Councillor Hawkins. Any discussion?
I'll have a supplementary follow-up motion.
Councillor Paul.
The problem is if you bring the bank into that resolution, the bank will lean on their other property for the money. I think that's what they're trying to get away from.
I'm not specifying the bank in that resolution, I'm just saying other parties. I mean, clearly the bank has an interest. If it's got the mortgage, you can't ignore them, so they're going to have a say. So, no further discussion. I'll put all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.
Supplementary
And
motion.
now we'll write it.
Supplementary motion. I want to put a motion that we put the same amount of efforts into a community group called the Middlemarch Golf Club that came to staff directly, asked for help in this very similar situation, and they were declined help. Well, my understanding, and that's, I may be wrong, but they weren't. They were told that there was nothing that they could do to help. Now, I'm sorry. This is where the situation of inequity is. I think we could have had staff say to the community and facilitate a community conversation about how we could ensure that the golf club in Middlemarch has a long-term future. Those resources were not made available to that club, and for that reason, the only reason is that they went to staff well before the annual plan to ask for help. It didn't get in. They didn't come as a submitter, but I don't know why they should be deprived by not being a submitter to this process.
Well, if you can get a seconder.
Okay, so my motion is that they're given equally assistance in that process.
I would be happy to second a motion which was something to the effect that in the drafting of the Parks and Recreation Strategy, staff address issues pertaining to equity of support for community facilities. And that way we can establish a high-level policy, and it gives it a place to go in terms of staff's work program. And if there are specific issues around Middlemarch Golf Club, send them to me as chair, and I will work with staff in relation to those.
And that's fine, and I'm happy with that resolution. I'll second that motion.
I missed that because Councillor Benson just coughed. I'm getting tired.
So made miserable.
Right. Is everyone happy that they basically understand the intent of that motion while it's being written? Just far away. Basically, what I'm hearing from staff is that this won't be the only club in a comparable situation. What I'm hearing from Councillor Wilson is there are clubs in parallel situations.
We've asked for help.
And the intent of this motion is to develop an approach that takes into account all of those so that we've got somewhere to go when any individual case comes up. Councillor Benson?
We've already heard the manager tell us the number of facilities we already own, one of which we were discussing a minute ago, because people are complaining that it's a wash when it rains, and now dropped on us in the guise of equity is the suggestion we're going to help private people with private facilities on private land, as well as trying to cope with the huge burden that we can't fund of facilities that people have built that happen to be on reserve land. And I think we're creating a huge issue for ourselves.
Right. Councillor Wilson, speaking to the motion.
Speaking to the motion, the inequity comes because in the Strathtyre and in other parts of Dunedin, there are no public reserves, and therefore everything is privately owned because the community has willingly and very well, competently provided those provisions for themselves through different mechanisms. The only difference here is because Dunedin City has a large number of reserves within its old urban pre-1989 boundary that we facilitated clubs in a different mechanism. That is the inequity. And the fact is that you won't find, apart from where the cenotaph is, which was donated by the people of Middlemarch anyway, a piece of land owned by council for public reserves in the Strathtyre. The Hyde Hall is held by the committee who has a domain that runs that hall, leasing out that domain.
Further speakers? No further speakers. Councillor McTavish, do you want to exercise a right of reply?
That's the issue. Are you replying to the first one?
I think His Worship is asking me for my right of reply on the motion, which reads
Exactly.
that staff consider during the development of the Parks and Recreation Strategy equity issues pertaining to council support of community groups involved in the upkeep of parks and recreation assets.
And use of.
And involved in, it can't be restricted to parks and recreation assets alone if you take what Councillor Wilson has talked about.
It's their assets.
So it's
the parks and recreation assets without belonging to DCC capital.
No, it's got to include more than DCC owned assets.
Well, I think the issue is it's Parks and Rec strategy. So in relation to the Parks and Rec strategy, it's Parks and Rec assets, which are of relevance.
We'll still reference those other ones as well, I hope. If it mentions equity issues, it can reference, the point I'm making is that the facility that Councillor Wilson is talking about is not on a park or a reserve, and it's not owned by us either. So there needs to be...
Recreational asset.
But Parks and Rec doesn't necessarily mean council Parks and Rec. It means community Parks and Rec.
Gotcha, sorry. Yep. All right, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. You voted against that? Right, councillors, I am going to call it a day. Just, could I have your attention? There have been a number of papers, I think 2 or 3 circulated. These are for your information for the discussion tomorrow, so please ensure. One is called, as a memo on the Dunedin Partnership.
It's an amended one.
That's an amended one.
We had one.
And the other is the proposed legislative amendments and revised draft development contributions policy, and that comes out of the select committee comments and deliberations last Monday.
I don't know if we talked today. We've also circulated the list of, can't read it's personal for me, but requests for funding
Oh yes,
and equivalence to a grant.
that's the other one, the request for funding list. It's important that you have that because we will be going through that tomorrow.
Councillors, just so you don't have to read all of the Economic Development Partnership paper, the changes in the example of one is in the changes have occurred in the example of one of the terms of reference documents which is in there. So as a result of the Dunedin Partnership meeting the other day, we have tightened up the separation, and so as an example we have updated that terms of reference.
Thank you.
Yes, Chris.
Thank you all. Reconvene tomorrow.